Some of the questions that you get asked as a GRC analyst is around framework. So what types of frameworks do you know? What types of frameworks are you familiar with? So we did go over a couple of them. Some of the questions that you get asked as a GRC analyst is around framework. So what types of frameworks do you know? What types of frameworks are you familiar with? So we did go over a couple of them. So one of them will be NIST. So there's NIST Cybersecurity Framework. There is NIST 800-53 or NIST 800-37, which would be the risk management framework. 800-53 would be the controls within that framework. There's ISSO, there is PCI DSS, there's HIPAA, there's HITRUST. So there are many different frameworks out there. So they're going to ask you which ones you're familiar with. One of the things I tell people is if you're going to learn frameworks and security controls, know either ISO or NIST. Most of those controls will be mapped and they're easily, they're compatible. All right, so that's one of the questions you get asked. So obviously, as a GRC analyst, you need to know governance, risk, and compliance. So governance would be the laws, regulations surrounding the items of compliance that you will be involved in. So you have to know the different regulations out there, FISMA, HIPAA. You've got to know the Privacy Act, the different laws and regulations out there that deal with cybersecurity and privacy. Then the risk part of it, you have to know what risk is, right? So one question you can get asked is, what is the difference between risk, vulnerability, and a threat? So a vulnerability is a gap in security controls. So a gap in security controls would be a vulnerability. So example would be if you do not have an acceptable use policy, that will be a gap in security. Another thing would be if you have an office or a safe that's wide open, that's not locked, that will be a gap in security. If you have a system that's not hacked, it's not been updated, has no antivirus, that's not been hardened, that will be a gap in security. So that is a vulnerability. A risk, on the other hand, is the probability or the chances that the gap will be exploited by a threat actor or threat. And a threat is one who exploits the vulnerability. So a threat could be a hacker, could be an insider, could be an employee. So that will be the difference between a threat, vulnerability, and a risk. Another question you could get asked is sometimes a trick question. How do you eliminate risk? How do you eliminate risk? The answer is you cannot eliminate risk. You can only reduce risk to an acceptable level. So there are different things out there. There's some risks that you don't know about. So there's no way you could totally eliminate risk. You can only reduce it to an acceptable level. The acceptable level is determined by the authorizing official or the person who's in charge of that organization to make those decisions and accept risk. They might say, well, this is a risk we're willing to take in order to do business. If the security control exceeds, the benefit of what they're going to implement, then the authorizing official or person in charge might decide to accept that risk. Another question you could get asked is, tell me how many risk responses are available, or give me some example transfer the risk. You transfer the risk by having insurance or having a contractor who shoulders part of that risk. You could also avoid the risk. So maybe you're considering using Windows or using Linux, and then you're told that in order to use Windows, it has a lot of risk and there are a lot of vulnerabilities, and you decide, you know what, we're not going to use Windows, we're going to go with Linux. That's just an example. But just choosing not to go with something that could cause risk or introduce risk would be avoiding that risk. You could also respond to risk by mitigating the risk. So you're addressing the risk, you're solving, remediating that risk. All right. So those are some examples of how you would respond to risk. Also, you could accept the risk. So you say, hey, this risk is not more important than the business we're trying to do or our mission. We're accepting this risk, which leads to another question that you get asked is, for risk acceptance, what must be in place for a risk acceptance? Or the question could be posed in this way, what are the elements on a risk acceptance form? So basically, you're accepting the risk. Well, not you, the person in charge of that organization, authorizing official, CIO, will be accepting the risk. And in order for you to accept the risk, you need to know what the risk is. So the description of the risk should be on that risk acceptance form. The impact of the risk should be also detailed on the form. The reason why you cannot remediate or fix or address that risk should be on there. There's also compensating control should be on there. So compensating control is something you're putting in place of the original control that is required. For example, if I am supposed to have a badge reader on a door, and I'm not able to implement the badge reader on the door, maybe because it's expensive, you don't have resources, then you would have a padlock and maybe a sign in and sign out fee, which is not as effective as the original control as a badge reader, but it's a compensation. So you have to have compensating controls. Oh, maybe you have an issue with a system that is not patched because the vendor does not have the patches, or maybe it's a legacy system and the support for that system is no longer supported by Microsoft. So you could say something like, well, this system is internal. In order for you to get to the system, you would have to be on the network, blah, blah, blah. You'd have to have something in place to say we have other layers of security to prevent this from being a risk. Another question you could get asked is, have you worked on a security plan or a system security plan? This is a very important document that details the system and components and security controls and POCs, addresses, diagrams for that particular system. So if your answer is yes, you've worked on a security plan, be prepared to explain what you actually did on the security plan, some of the components of the security plan. So if you have one, look at the table of contents. Your security plan, like I mentioned, should have POCs, diagrams, security controls, description of the system, who's in charge of the system owner, and things of that nature. And in terms of the work that you actually perform on a security plan, it's either you develop the security plan, so you can either develop the security plan from scratch or by using templates. The other thing you could do in terms of working on a security plan is reviewing the security plan. So you're reviewing the security plan for accuracy. The third thing you could do in terms of working on a security plan is updating the security plan. So if you find um, inaccurate information, you could always update that information. You could always, update things like if someone left or someone's title has changed, or there's a new IP address, or there's a new system um, that's added to the inventory. You could always update that security plan. All right. So I hope this was helpful. Please subscribe to the channel for more information on cybersecurity. If you're looking to become a GRC analyst, please contact me or comment below.
Don't forget to subscribe and like. We're also on IG at CyberFirst Solutions. Thank you.